Good morning and hello everyone. Welcome to our second webinar of the series Renovation and Thermal Modernization of Historic Buildings in Time of Climate Crisis. My name is Aleksandar Jelovac. As last week, I will also be your webinar host, and in behalf of Croatia GBC and Senzimir Foundation, I wish you a welcome and thank you for joining us. We have prepared a very special webinar for you today. We have four presenters and speakers who will share with you their knowledge and expertise. The topic of our today's webinar is cultural heritage and earthquake challenges. And in a minute, we will dive into this interesting topic. But before we go, let me just briefly thank you again for joining our one-month educational program. We are already in our second week, and that means that by this Friday, by 15th, that is the first deadline to send in your first assignments. So if you haven't already joined the Moodle platform, please go on the Moodle platform where you can find the materials, the assignments, and send them in by this Friday. I will remind you regarding the Moodle platform at the end of this webinar as well. As last time, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat and Q&A and write in your questions. And at the end of each presenter's time, we will read to them the questions and we will have some time to answer your questions. So thank you all. Without any further ado, allow me to introduce our first speaker. Her name is Miss Iva Bošnjak. She is one of the co-founders of the civil association SOS Zagreb, which was established after the devastating earthquake in Zagreb with the aim of promoting the reconstruction and revitalization of the city of Zagreb. Her professional background includes almost 2 decades of experience in financial institutions, mainly in investment and development banking and capital markets. She is also a proud mother of 3 children, and building a better future and environment for them was her incentive to join SOS Zagreb. So as a very short introduction to her presentation, I will play one very interesting video. Thank you and enjoy. Okay. Ms. Bošnjak, good morning. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Aleksandar. Thank you for this introduction. I think that there was no better way to start this panel with this video, which was prepared by one of our SOS Zagreb members. This video is very short but emotional, and I think it explains better than 1,000 words what really happened in Zagreb. This is very important, especially because of our international participants of this webinar. Unfortunately, 6 months after making this video, things are not getting better. And the real reconstruction that we are fighting for through our association still didn't happen in a way that we think that our citizens deserve. So I will just now start to sharing my presentation, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to present our association and to show what we are doing and to show to people that we can do better, what we are fighting for, and we will see in the next few slides what are our intentions. So just if you could check whether
Just go full screen.
full screen, okay. Let's see. Okay.
Full screen is at the end.
Yeah,
Of
okay.
the slide bar.
Okay. I see.
Yes, great.
Okay.
We can see it, it's perfect, and you may start.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, as you already said, I'm one of the 13 co-founders of SOS Zagreb. We are enthusiastic individuals, I would say, people from different parts of the society. Among our members, we have different kind of professionals like lawyers, PRs, experts, real estate developers. We are all together gathered with a goal of boosting the process of reconstruction of buildings in city of Zagreb. The backbone of our establishment is a Facebook group Svi mi u Zagrebu, which was initialed and started by one of our members, Mrs. Vesna Blašković, one day after the earthquake, with the goal to set up information sharing platform for citizens of Zagreb who were, I would say, a little bit confused after the earthquake, what to do, what is the process, how to start to reconstruct the building, and so on. So this platform actually consists of, I would say, more than 10,000 members who are very active, very agile, and very keen to push forward the reconstruction process in city of Zagreb. Since our establishment, and it happened a little bit more than half a year ago, SOS Zagreb has held many meetings with main stakeholders of this reconstruction process. During these meetings and correspondences, we are constantly emphasizing and indicating what are the bottlenecks in this process, and we are trying to improve this process and to push forward the activities. Consequently, in August, 2 months ago, SOS Zagreb became a member of Expert Association for Reconstruction, which is in Croatian Stručni savjet za obnovu. This is a multi-institutional advisory hub comprised of experts from various institutions. This body was given a mandate by prime ministers, and members of this body are various ministries, chambers of architects, engineers, and universities, and so on. So by joining this association, our voice is becoming louder, and it also gives us an opportunity to contribute more to this reconstruction process. I would like to say a few words about our pledge that we set up when establishing the association. There are 5 main pillars of our pledge. First pillar is less bureaucracy. Like we already mentioned in some of our medias, at the beginning of this process, it was a very large amount of paperwork, and our intention was to shift this administrative and paperwork load to institutions of Republic of Croatia, who are anyhow in public databases present. We see some progress in this field because ministry took part of the documentation collecting job on themselves. So we are really glad that with our efforts we could contribute to to this goal. Second, and I would say maybe even more important pillar is a plan of reconstruction. Like in any other business, in our opinion, it is very important to set up a real, firm, realistic plan of reconstruction, which should be done on institutional level. We should get the answers on the questions when, how, and with what kind of which financing sources will the construction be done. And in order to be able to deliver a plan, it is necessary to connect all kinds of involved institutions to work mutually and in an organized way. At the moment, we don't see the coordination between institutions in that sense. In addition to this plan of reconstruction, very important thing that we would like to see is a clear timeline. Namely, it would be very, very important for us to know when, at which moment will be each part of the city, each kindergarten, school, hospital, public building, residential block, when it will be done. It is important because of the citizens, and as well it is important because of the construction infrastructure, traffic regulation, public tendering processes, and so on. So in that sense, we really advocate to see, we would really like to see some transparency and clarity on this thing. Next thing that our pledge is responsibility. This refers in the first place on institutions, because institutions are mandated to do this business of reconstruction, but as well, this responsibility refers to inhabitants, to owners of these buildings, who should from their side incentivize this process and initiate this process and to be an active part of it. And at the end, the most important thing is safety. This whole thing is about safety of inhabitants and about safety of tourists and people who are actually walking this street. This reconstruction is not about makeup, aesthetics, it's about walking more safely over the streets of Zagreb. Now I would like to give some chronology of this of the earthquake. Like we already seen in the video and we already know, earthquake happened in March, half a year ago. It took 6 long months to create a legal framework for conducting the reconstruction. In this period, it was, I would say it was a vacuum period, because it was uncertainty in terms of reconstruction, in terms of scope of works, in terms of financing, subsidies, right and obligation, and it was no decision making in this time frame. Everything was staying at status quo. Act on reconstruction of earthquake damaged buildings came into force in September 2020. And later on, 2 months after, in November 2020, Reconstruction Fund was established. Reconstruction Fund is the main implementation body for public tendering and conducting all the process of the reconstruction. Not 1 month later, very huge earthquake in Petrinec region happened. Unfortunately, many people lost their lives, which is, I would say, the most important thing, but also it caused very huge material damage. And I would say at this moment, people in Zagreb also became aware that nothing really happened with reconstruction of Zagreb in almost 1 year. So at that point of time, also SOS Zagreb was established, and in order to push these processes and incentivize the reconstruction. A bit about figures. So according to the publication need assessment, which was conducted by Croatian government and supported by World Bank, the value of destroyed physical assets is 11 billion euro. This refers only to city of Zagreb. And why is this amount so high? It's the answer lies in cultural heritage, because very huge damage was happened in city of Zagreb. Most of this part of the city is classified, is protected, and is classified as cultural heritage. So the value of this damage is, for that reason, very, very high. Something about facts, some facts and figures on the process. During this earthquake in Zagreb, about 26,000 buildings were damaged in these 10 seconds. One fresh data that we collected from the report of Reconstruction Fund, until the end of August, until 1 month ago, Ministry of Physical Planning, who is the main body, received almost 13,000 applications of the citizens for the reconstruction or removal of the buildings, for construction of replacement houses, for monetary assistance or exemptions of the payment. And just 2% of these applications were transferred into decisions, which show us that we have a very huge bottleneck in the body of Ministry of Physical Planning and Construction. Out of these 26 damaged buildings, 25% were classified as unusable or temporary unusable. When talking about this labeling, this is red. They received red and yellow, yellow marks, which means that actually these owners are obliged to reconstruct their building. They they belong to Act on Reconstruction, and they should initial process of reconstruction. What is very disappointing fact is that only 35% of the owners have officially submitted application form for reconstruction to the ministry. So in that sense, besides very weak regulatory framework, I would say, and reluctancy on the side of the owners, we see also some other challenges. But in the meantime, public awareness of inefficiency of this act became very transparent, and it resulted in amendment of the act, which is currently passing through parliamentary procedure. Our association SOS Zagreb also proposed some amendments of this act, and in order to allow better process, we hope that the amendments will be adopted in the way it should be. So since this webinar and panel is refers to cultural heritage, I would like to also add some other challenges that we will face, or we are already facing. I mean, we are very well aware of the fact that EU is published some time ago EU Green Deal with intention to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050. It may seem that it is far away, but some of the actions will already start to happen very soon. Why is that important for the buildings? It's because the buildings are responsible for 40% of the consumption of primary energy and 36 of emission of CO2. So we will also see some new directions in reconstruction of buildings. How is this important? We also see in new social climate fund that will support EU citizens with 72 billion euro over 7 years for renovation of buildings to be more energy efficient. We also see a lot of stories about National Plan for Recovery and Resilience in the media. And there is also one sub-component, reconstruction of building, which is 12% of this budget, or 6 billion kuna. There will be a lot of measures to support integral reconstruction of building and include highly energy efficient systems in order to transform the decarbonized fund of buildings. So we see, in that sense, we see very huge challenges in the process of reconstruction. And as we see in Zagreb, the focus of reconstruction is only on repairing of damaged part of main construction elements of the building. And there is a lack of awareness of energy efficiency element and including it in integral reconstruction of buildings. So we are witnessing a lot of very good examples and best practice model across the Europe in terms of renovation and retrofitting of the old buildings. There's also one nice example of Castle of Bračak, which is cultural heritage reconstruction with EE solutions. So talking about our pledge, SOS Zagreb strongly supports making comprehensive and interdisciplinary approach and also using very appropriate improvements in energy efficiency, new materials, new technologies of the building while still respecting conservationist principles in terms of protecting and preserving external character of the buildings. So I think that my time is already out, and I would like to thank you all for the attention, for the time, and I would like to give floor to the next panelist, to Alexander.
Thank you, Ms. Bošnjak. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. You introduced us to the SOS Zagreb Association, show to us what your main goals and outcomes are, and thank you for also outlining briefly of what has happened in Zagreb and in Croatia regarding the earthquakes in the last year and a half. As I see in the chat and question and answers, there are no questions at this point, so we will continue on with our next presenter, and then later on, if there are going to be some questions, we'll get back to Iva as well. Our next presenter is Ms. Mihaela Zamolo, who is a civil engineer and also a board member of Croatia GBC. Through her many years of experience, she has been involved in construction, design, earthquake engineering, cultural heritage, testing, quality management, product certification, and sustainable construction, just to mention a few. Ms. Zamolo has also many years of experience as a member of numerous professional societies and has served on various technical committees and commissions for the development of regulation in the construction field. I'm sure that if you went to our Moodle platform, that you noticed that Ms. Zamolo is also an author of Our Earthquake Problems Affecting Heritage Buildings, which is the current working material, and it will be published in the final version of the publication next year. So, Ms. Zamolo, good morning. Thank you for being here, and you may share your screen and begin with your presentation. Thank you. Great, we can see. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for presenting me in such a good manner. Thank you. I have a very large explanation between between cultural heritage and earthquake problems, and I will like to be as quick as possible to pass all this. The main problem is coming with cultural monuments and seismic goes together, and they give challenges, as you mentioned before, but lots of problem and lots of opportunity. Let's start from the beginning. My introduction is connected with cultural heritage building, which occupied the entire territory in Croatia. It was built in a various periods of art, from prehistory to modern and contemporary art, and as a seismic hazard also cover almost the entire territory, and with medium and high intensity on about 90% of Croatian territory. So we have a big problem. But how hold them together? It is a question not only for Croatia, it is a question for European seismic active countries like Italy, Greece, Turkey, Balkan countries, and of course Croatia. And we have the same problems, how to ensure this in seismic resistance, or increase them during maintenance or reconstruction. That means when we change essential requirements, especially mechanical resistance and stability, or when repair this building after earthquake. And in the past, we have another problem with war destruction during homeland war. And the other one is how to ensure safety and preserve cultural, architectural, and heritage value. Let's start with our situation in Croatia. Cultural heritage buildings have to be managed with them, and we have registered for cultural goods in Croatia. They have lots of data. Some are connected with legal status as protection, cultural property, or preventive protection. Then we have data about types as immovable, individual, single protection, building, culture, historical whole, cultural landscape, archaeology, intergible, and UNESCO protected building. Protected building are mostly data are collected under individual or cultural historic hold. We have about 400 and more individual permanent protected building, and of sacral building that is about 16,000 and residential about 11,000. On the other hand, we have a cultural historical hall, about 100 protected. Half of them are in the rural area and half in urban area. In Zagreb, we have largest protected cultural historical wall, much larger than in any other town. And in Zone A and Zone B, we have about 13,000 buildings. UNESCO protected buildings is over the coast mostly, but it doesn't mean that we have that we will have some new one on the south part of Croatia. Here is this main Diocletian Palace in Split, Euphrasia Basilica in Poreču, Romanic city Trogir, very famous old town in Dubrovnik, Šibenik Cathedral, and we have defense walls and towers under Republic for Venice from 16th and 17th century in Zadar and Šibenik. Due to Hague Convention for Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict in 1954, we have established a trademark for protection, but when we put them on our building in Croatia, it doesn't mean almost nothing during the heartland 19th, at the end of the last century. All cultural heritage buildings are built from Neolithic to modern and contemporary art period, and we can divide them into one is traditional, which is built up to middle of the last century and finished with classicism, and the modern after after that period and start with modern area. Neolithic area is antique and Roman area. They start from the islands in Adriatic Sea. On this, we have a Hvar, we have Korčula, and others, which is very famous and attractive for tourism, but it is very difficult to preserve them all the time. In the Middle Age, we have also famous building, most of them, that start all Croatian architecture in that time, and dozens large churches and hundreds smaller was built. Then in the Renaissance, we have some churches under UNESCO protection, one in Trogir, and a very famous one in Zadar, Cathedral of San Stošija. And then we are going on to Šibenik Cathedral, to Old Town of Republic in Dubrovnik Republic, excuse me. And the stone walls in stone, which are the after China's stone, the second largest one in the world. From the Neolithic to Moderna in the Gothic period, we have cathedral, famous cathedral in Zagreb. It was damaged twice, one in earthquake 1880. Then 1906, and now in 2020, it was hardly damaged. From Baroque and Rococo, we have a cathedral in Đakovo, cathedral in Rijeka, Baroque church St. Vlaho in Dubrovnik. Then we have very famous St. Mary Magdalene in Sela, near Sisak. It was hardly damaged in this earthquake, Petrinec earthquake. And it was damaged before in Homeland War. We repaired them and now it's again damaged. And for classicism and historicism, we have a Croatian National Theatre, Academy building in Zagreb, Mirogoj Cemetery, very famous with Sarkat, Secesija, 20th century in Zagreb, in Osijek, Moderna in Zagreb, very famous Croatian fine arts house known as Mestrović Pavilion. It was built in the middle of last century, and Burza Palace in Zagreb some years earlier. Then functionalism in the second half of century. We have several very famous buildings. As I mentioned before, we have traditional and modern building. For our presentation is much more important, this one from the traditional period. This is the different architecture period, construction and materials, and all are built before 1946, This is a year when we established the first construction regulation in this region in Croatia in connection with former Yugoslavia state. These all traditional heritage building, as the building in whole, have different vertical and horizontal resistance. Sufficient, almost always vertical, but not enough, and very seismic, low historical resistance for seismic action. We have to know that according to our current regulation connected with Eurocodes, this building about 4 times have 4 times less horizontal resistance, and for that reason is very dangerous, and their behavior and damages in earthquake is very, very heavy and important for building in whole. But fortunately, very often the building behavior surprises us in this in some positive way. Typology of this building is vertical building elements, horizontal for construction. The vertical element is of stone bricks with very low tensile strength lime mortar, and the horizontal floor are always mostly flexible, wooden beam or wards on arches. And the concrete is start using after 1920. Before that, we have only this type of flexible wooden construction floor. The height of this building in a rural area is up to 4 floors, and in urban area is 5 floors, and in rural area up to 2 floors. Sacral buildings, of course, corresponding to typology of their purpose, have different materials, stone, bricks, wood, cast iron, steel, and a small number of the monuments are built with wood construction, mostly houses and chapels, a smaller one. All these characteristics lead us to find a large number of inherent deficiency and conceptual errors in this building. These are connected with low knowledge, with structural typology of that time, of available technologies, and of the materials we use for this structure. Inherent deficiency are very different. It is not always present in all of the building, but it is sufficient resistant of structure, irregular in floor plan and height. There are insufficient load-bearing capacity and stability out of plane for walls, upsets or connecting walls, low tensile stretch of load-bearing walls, even it was stone or brick, because they have a very weak mortar, and flexible floor structure, not rigid, which is very good for behavior of seismic behavior. Inadequate roof construction, not good connections of wooden beam and walls, harmful staircase construction, especially when there is a cantilever style, and deficiency of the foundation and the soil as well. But in the time they acquired deficiency happened because of old and not good maintenance of the structure of the building. in controlled reconstruction connected with walls and floors, upgrades, previous actions, which sometimes is very heavy, especially if it happened earthquake or fire activities on the building. Then the influence of the atmosphere, of moisture, and underlayment of the foundation. This is all very important for understanding and to prevent how building will behave after the earthquake happened. But in that time, we have to know that the earthquake is not heavy, and it is, the influence is not so bad if the building have enough seismic. If it have a very good seismic risk behavior. These seismic risk behavior are coming for different factors, and they are combined with seismic hazard, with local soil, subsoil, with vulnerability of the building, and with concentration of buildings. All these are important, not always in the same value, but we have to think about that even in Croatia, maybe in other countries is different. It is this seismic activity is not, and seismic risk is not a larger component in comparison with other natural disasters. But due to unpredictability of this seismic action, this is very dangerous for building, all building, and especially for cultural heritage builder. Risk should be assessed, and of course they have to be included in building regulation for the project level, for land planning level, and for setting of insurance rates for each particular building. And it is very critical for building behavior and building damage. Even they are not the seismic hazard in Zagreb is not the biggest. They are bigger on the south part of our coast. Zagreb has the highest seismic risk, mostly connected with vulnerability and the type of building and of concentration. Let us give some information about each of these components. Seismic hazard give us information that the earthquake will occur in central area within in a certain period and in the certain strength, but we don't know when, and this is the main problem. We have in Europe the same reason why earthquake occur. It is a mutual convergence happened between African plate and European plate, and particularly in our country, Adriatic plate. We have for the purpose of calculation and for design building, new building and reconstruction, the old one, we use a seismic hazard map, which have a peak soil acceleration information, probability when it will be occur, and the return period of 475 years. This comes from Eurocode 8. And in the same time, this is information for calculation the seismic action and for response spectrum. The second, what is important to have in mind, it is a plate, it is a fault, which is here presented only for this last earthquake in Croatia. This is Podsljeme, so-called, and Jastrebarsko and Petrinja fault. And this was the place where the last earthquake occurs. Local subsoils is very important because earthquake impact depends on the depth and distance of hypocenter, as well as on local subsoil. And up to 10 times we have a greater intensity on some soil in comparison with the one on the rock. That means that the building have the best behavior if they are built on the rock. Now, something about building vulnerability. All cultural heritage building up to middle of last century is masonry without reinforced concrete element, and they are very on that building the strong influence of damage happened after earthquake will occur. They are highly sensitive to seismic effects, and according to EMS scale, for that building, the vulnerability class is B, and this scale is going from A to F, and A is the most vulnerable building. That means that this one is very close to this higher value. Building seismic risk when we talk in Croatia is, of course, as on other part, connected with the year of construction and the type of the construction, and they go almost together. Building connected with the year of construction, we have information that about 45 buildings are built up to 1980. That means without any fault for design seismic resistant building. And to 2005, more 50. That means that 95% of buildings are built without any influence of seismic resistance. At the same time, type of structure is almost the same. 45 buildings are masonry building. Some of them, about 32%, are confined masonry. And that means that about almost 80% buildings are built without any reinforced elements. And according to that, they are very seismic. They have a very low seismic resistance. In Zagreb, the situation is much worse. Type of structure is more masonry than in other generally all over the country. This is about 75%, and we don't know exactly, but we have information as much as we have that about 90% of building in Donji Grad is built in masonry. Here you can see the graph which shown the value concentration in city Zagreb. Cities, especially developed areas, have high value concentration, and they are much more higher than in rural area. In Zagreb, the value concentration is about 1,200 per square meter, and in Petrinec area about less than 40 people to square meter. This is much more different. Here on this graph, you see the area of Donji Grad much more have a value concentration higher. Then is Upper Town and Medveščak, and the last one is this area where the earthquake happened, where was the epicenter of the earthquake in 2020 in Zagreb. Damage on cultural heritage buildings are very different. They depend, of course, of this seismic risk of building. And if the seismic risk is low, we will not have any damage, and opposite, if it is high, we will have a bit large damage on the building. Here, in general, the number of damaged buildings is different in Zagreb earthquake and Petrinec earthquake, and about temporary unusable building is almost the same, about 20%, but unusable is 5% in Zagreb and about 12% in Petrinec. When we look in Zagreb, how many buildings under cultural protection are damaged, that was about 3% of all damaged buildings in Zagreb. Here is two graphs. One is damage of all building, and on the left side we have Zagreb area. You can see how many usable, temporary, unusable, and usable buildings are assessed. And this is the information for Donji Grad, and this is the information for Petrinec. On the right side, you have damage on cultural heritage building. In Zagreb, in Zona A, this is about Donji Grad area, and Zona B, this is area of Upper Town, Gornji Grad, and Medveščak. And here you can see the individual building in Petrinec and in cultural historic hall in Petrinec. Much more buildings were strongly damaged in Petrinec on cultural heritage building when we talk about. Here is information that in Homeland War, we have about 2,400 cultural monuments destroyed or hardly damaged or low damage. What about behavior and damages in general? For cultural heritage building, they are exposed to various actions and influence during life. Their life significantly is longer than the projected life for building is about 50 years. Also on the behavior of building and damages have influenced climate changes and natural catastrophes like floods, storms, and others. All natural disasters are predictable, as I said before, but earthquake is not, and is very dangerous for the building and for our life too. And the behavior and damages in the earthquake strongly is depending on seismic risk. So we have to take care about all these categories which make the seismic risk higher or not so important. Damage in all earthquake, and we can see the same in this one. Influence on chimneys, roof cover, gable walls, or superstructures. They cause a lot of cracks in the connections with walls and horizontal floor structure. They have influence on the bearing walls and other. They have influence on parapet walls, lintels, around openings. A lot of cracks happened, and on a ceiling structure, but they are falling down. They are not damage on construction. They are just ceiling damages on ceilings. Also, we have lots of damage on staircases. Especially we found this situation is in large building like Palaces in the Donji Grad in Zagreb. Then in partition walls, which takes a lot of seismic actions during the actions, and save the bearing walls. That was luck for this situation of behavior and damages. Then we have damages on load bearing walls in vertical, diagonal, X direction, and crashing and damage of the walls. Sacral building beside this situation of damage have damage on towers, domes, walls, and arches. And this is funny and maybe good situation that lots of damage is not visible from the outside. So it seems that the town is in very good condition, and especially these bearing walls, outside walls of building are not so damaged. But when we come inside, we will see a lots of damage, and some buildings have a collapse due to loss of mechanical resistance and stability. But in Zagreb, that was mainly building, family buildings, small buildings close to epicenter of earthquake, and in Petrinec earthquake that was others too. What comes after earthquake happened? We have the phase for repair, renovation, or reconstruction, and generally it goes in 3 terms. One is short terms, then medium and long terms. In first terms, we have urgent removal and damages, all damages elements, such as chimneys, architectural ornaments, and others. This is for protection the people and the structure after earthquake. And we also have protection of evacuation of movable cultural goods. In medium terms, they include recovery and conservation and restoration, and the long terms include complete recovery to decrease vulnerability of the structure, and the architectural and historical value as well. And especially attention, because of the cultural heritage building, have to be on the facade of this historical building. On this period, we save some opportunity for building, such we can preserve the value of cultural heritage and in the same time reach satisfactory earthquake resistance. We have to have in mind build back better. That means that we have opportunity to make the other basic requirements better and to strengthening these basic requirements, even when we talk about energy renewal or acoustic or user health or others. And in that time, it is opportunity to make the building sustainable as much as possible according to technical possibilities and financial, of course. In repairing, renovation and reconstruction, we have different approach when we talk about individual single protected building. Then we need to have conservation study conditions. We have the document which is the base for all other protection and strengthening. And for the cultural historical whole, we have some easier way of protection and renovation and reconstructions according to guidelines, which is the part of the program of measures adopted in a Reconstruction Act, and it makes it seems that it is not easy to use that. But the main reason for that is to make it easier and quicker. Generally, all the building, cultural heritage building as other one have to be repair or reconstruction, but for cultural heritage building, we can rebuild it as a facsimile, which is not so famous, but in sometimes and some situation is only possible way of reparation and reconstruction. And then the summary for Croatia is that cultural heritage building occupied the entire territory, as we know. Seismic hazard affect the entire territory with different seismic risk for building. And in recent earthquake, we see that the damage was severe on the region and the public residential building. All of this was mainly traditional masonry building with load bearing walls, mostly with bricks, and columns rear. Then we have arches and wards of various shapes and wooden floors. We have difficult to use the regulation requirements because it is very difficult to put together safety conditions and cultural values conditions and requirements. And we see that in the disciplinary approach are needed. This is only way to find optimal solution in particular cases. Summary for all others, cultural heritage building is that all of them have a low earthquake resistance. They are vulnerable and seismic risk for individual protected cultural property should be determined before seismic happened, as well as conservation and restoration requirements. And strategy should be adopted to strengthen all building which is not damaged in the earthquake until now, because we don't want to lose them in the new earthquake. And we have to have in mind that the seismic activities is growing as climate changes result. Additional specialist knowledge we need to have and interdisciplinary approach to manage with all this. And we need to have informal education of all potential experts of various specialists for repairing and reconstruction of damaged building after earthquake. And important is to improve of seismic resistance on currently undamaged buildings too. Motto for Croatia and for other maybe the same. Earthquake resistance should be increased and cultural value of the protected cultural property preserved. That we need to have in mind during the reconstruction and reparation after earthquake, or our activity have been done under this motto. Thank you for the attention.
Formative presentation. Thank you also for doing the summary at the end of the presentation, for stressing out the importance of interdisciplinary approach, because in order to resolve all the issues that we are facing, there is no other way than solving it together, interdisciplinary. And also your motto that you finished with, it's a very beautiful and very useful one, of saying that earthquake resistance should be increased and cultural value of to protect. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. Once again, as I see in the chat, there are no questions. We have two more speakers who are left, and please let me encourage you all to use the Q&A and chat to ask any questions if you have. So Ms. Zamolo, thank you once again, and I will now introduce our next speaker, Professor Josip Atalić, who is a professor at the Faculty of Civil Engineering in Zagreb. He received his PhD in 2011 on the topic of traditional buildings. He is the author of about 30 scientific papers. His main research areas are seismic engineering, numerical modeling, and historic buildings. He is leading the development of the national documents regarding disaster risk assessment in the Republic of Croatia, earthquake risk, and a number of activities related to earthquake risk reduction in Croatia. And after the earthquakes in Zagreb and in Petrinec, he has participated in numerous mitigation activities that continue to this day. So I see that Professor Atalić is ready, that he shared his screen. So the floor is yours, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Alexander, for a very nice introduction. And I hope the presentation will complement all you need in this seminar. I'm, like you said, from Faculty of Civil Engineering, University of Zagreb. I'm usually representing one larger team. You can see noted below the title, and they usually like to stay in shadows, but in last year they did really great job. I got this title for my homework, but I have hard job to compliment my dear colleague Mihaela and her very comprehensive presentation. I will try to add some specifics, but a few topics I have to repeat, but I will try to minimize that. Like you know, like all speakers said, Croatia was struck by two earthquakes with serious consequences, especially in historical centers, and these earthquakes which raised a question about the resilience of our community of this kind of catastrophic event. But we should know it, because all available data collected in these years are screaming that earthquake is unacceptable risk for Croatia. Very interesting, because we did 2 national risk assessments with scenario of Zagreb, 2015 and 2018. You can see some of results that clearly said that historical center of Zagreb is endangered. And logically all other historical centers in Croatia. Most of our counties are in red, and our friends from Italy, Global Earthquake Model, Pavia presented also serious results, what we should be afraid of. Unfortunately, official strategic conclusions are problematic at this phase, and Croatia is country. We should be aware that Croatia is a country very, very limited or no funds for these activities. I will extract just few info related to exposure and vulnerability. It is in our mindset to build the houses to last forever. We have very, very aged building stock, like Mihaela previously said, mostly in no code or low code. You can see some data on the slide. Additionally, Croatia is very, very specific to poor maintenance. Most of the region has also massive illegal construction and undocumented reconstruction. Like you can see, one of these is on this slide. And in general, seismic risk awareness in Croatia was serious problem. And you can see, I have to mention that to highlight that reconstruction process in historic city centers, we can expect great discrepancy what we have on plans, available documentation, or what we can find a real situation. This is related to this illegal construction. Just few also data, this dark table related to changes of enforcement of seismic codes. In general, 1/3 of all Zagreb residential units are built before 1964, when first seismic code appeared in the region after Skopje earthquake. And additional half, very roughly, additional half of residential units built after 1964 to the modern regulations, modern standards, Eurocode, and that's where the seismic loads are less than 50% of the seismic loads were valid today, according to Eurocode. And I think you got perspective. And this situation, Zagreb was struck by a big earthquake. All data you already heard, but I have to mention that epicenter is really, really close to the city center, what is generally rare. Also, I have to mention that we are very, very lucky, because the day before earthquake, it was proclaimed the lockdown, and many people left outside of the city. And what is strange, that financial losses are far exceeding of expectation of the event of that size. And I have to mention that we are expecting around 6.5 by Richter scale. And I don't want to even think about what would be happen of event of that size. Some of famous pictures, like you saw it before, this Zagreb Cathedral. Many churches are severely damaged. Also hospital, because most of them are built in the period of big Zagreb earthquake, 1880. Also, many universities are damaged because they are also very, very old. We have all very long tradition from university. You can see here it's table on Croatian, but all our important buildings are placed in very, very old building, like president, the government, parliament, all ministries, courts, police, and this table represents more important building for the functionality after the earthquake. And most of them are built over 100 years ago. And the reconstruction of this kind of building usually lasts very, very long in normal times. But nowadays we are trying to push them to reconstruct very quickly by some urgent measures, because we have some funds from the Solidarity Fund. In historical part of the city, this is a usual damage, like Mihaela said, roof, chimneys, and gable walls. And we have serious problem with detaching the wall from the structure and losing the stability out of the plane. We are talking about here mostly unreinforced masonry building, URM, like usually said, and there's some specific problems what we have in historical part of the town. Most of the buildings are wounded from east side, and if you walk Zagreb today, Zagreb streets, you couldn't see any damages from outside. Maybe some up on upper floors, some parts of hanging out, but most of the buildings, like I said, written on the side, are wounded from inside. Also on outside of the city, near the epicenter, we had damage of houses. There are most legally made houses. And in general, like mentioned before, assessment of reconstruction cost made by our ministry or World Bank. Sorry, it's in Croatian, but we are talking about the billions of euros. There are some of more precise results related to the, you can see, cultural heritage part hits 1.4 keys of general. You can see it's a large part of the general sum is related to culture and cultural heritage. But we have to mention that only 3%, we will like to say, of damaged area is related to the cultural heritage, and this is saying even more how high our costs are needed, or investments are needed for the reconstruction cost of our cultural heritage in Zagreb. This is some result of 471 individually protected heritage building, and the usability, you can see this culture facility, churches, religious, education, and health center, divided by these marks, red, yellow, green, like my previous speaker said. And you can see clearly from this analysis that these individually protected heritage buildings are seriously damaged and need serious investments to build them back better. And this is one of the examples. Our architectural heritage protected building monument. We have school inside it. It's pretty usual in Croatia. This is data from our Ministry of Culture. And now it's a big discussion what to do, or reconstruct it or move out the school. You can see some plan of that school and some photos before earthquake and after the earthquake. Now it's building is prepared for reconstruction, and designers structural analysis was made to make invasive reconstruction solution with many reinforced concrete elements, with rigid diaphragms, all storage. You can see the blueprints, and nowadays these schools and some other are stopped by because it's a very big discussion. Is it conservation acceptable? And discussion is, can this school provide the safety for the pupils inside if this kind of measure doesn't made. Okay, another example is a reconstruction of another school, what was done a month after earthquake, where structural engineer entered the building and proposed intervention without any calculation or design. You can see some of intervention, and this was made because we have very limited time span, especially because this solidarity related to the Solidarity Fund. And this kind of reconstruction caused many parents from the pupils asked many questions about safety of their children. And I wrote that question about cultural heritage protection related to the schools, maybe hospitals, which are more endangered one, and usability of that building, and that is nowadays the huge question in Croatia. In general, this is some data about we made in Zagreb over 26,000 damage assessment. These are some of the result, and last table on the end says that over 70% of damaged building, usable, unusable, and temporarily unusable, were placed only 4 historical city parts. We have 16 in total. And this is almost related to this historical center. You can see it here on heat maps of the city. Up here is the epicenter, and this is the old city. Also, all this result proved the seismic risk analysis I showed on the beginning of my presentation. There are some also map. You can see protected zones A and B, ambientally protected zones. Inside are the marks previously showed, red, yellow, and green. You can see this city center is really devastated. Okay, I have to mention that our old part of the city are in city blocks or building aggregates, what makes us another big problem. And we have one huge project about urban renovation, where we gathered over 200 experts, 12 faculties for our university to provide solutions for reconstruction. This is in sense some kind of pilot project, and this is a huge discussion with these all different approaches, how to solve one of the blocks. And it's very hard to reconcile this different perspective of different experts. And we encountered many ownership problematic relations and unrecorded reconstruction and etc. Inside that process, we have colleagues which are dealing with energy efficiency problem, green infrastructure, and climate changes. This is one of the 12 studies in this Block 19 large study. You can see here Block 19 from the Google perspective, and I have to say this is one of the foundation of a reconstruction process in Zagreb, and we try to, we like to say, to put all knowledge we have inside it and try to build back better, like some kind of pilot study for all other city blocks in Zagreb. And I have to mention 2 serious problems: very complicated arrangement of the flat owners, legal distribution of investments, social situation, and very deficient or complex documentation with several parallel systems, poor database, and poor building maintenance. And that's one of the problems. Here, extract from the proposition of some reconstruction process. It's in Croatian, but I will describe it. We propose 10 different approaches. For simple one, with integration only in upper floors, not really structurally recommended, but it's a simple solution without moving people out, to several other approaches using old techniques to strengthening the wall, new one, new techniques, old one, and all of them are assuming to have a rigid or semi-rigid diaphragm on the floors, and final solution is to building replacement. And this is proposed to the designers, to the citizens to choose to get the perspective what they can do with their buildings. And I mentioned before, these building aggregates are very complex for structural design, especially the interaction between the buildings. And results of damage assessment after earthquake show that the buildings are helping each other, and the most of the buildings, neighboring buildings, are different height. You can see here on this perspective, and that's some of the problems we are dealing with. And I have I can show one of idea to take advantage to these walls in the row and try to reconstruct or try to synchronize the reconstruction process to do it at the same time as much as can be, and also to use all other, to take advantage of all other elements like stair core or some annexes, upgrades to fix, to make this city block stable in general. Okay, this is one of typical building. It's reinforced masonry. It's relatively high, 4, sometimes 6 stories, over 20 meters. This was made in this analysis. So in this global analysis, this specific building was made inside the new book presented for our designers. You can see we have facade wall and only one centrally placed wall between there are supports of wooden beams. Gable walls are usually, this one are usually poorly connected without that weight pressure, and that caused instability. You can see here example of wooden beams, and that are one of key problems in reconstruction process. You can see some reconstruction details, and most of them are related to connect that wall to form this rigid diaphragm and to make this structure to act like one block, one part, not like several unconnected structural elements. A second issue is how to strengthen the wall, presenting calculation showing that all that traditional building are between 20 or 40% what we can expect to our standards, now standards enforced Eurocode. And many solutions are tabled. Like I said, many new fiber material, traditional reinforced concrete strengthening is on the table, including insertion of new wall, tie rods, connections, and so on. And this is the big discussion between structural engineer and inside of our chamber. And I have to mention that one of serious problems is big, that non-linear calculation like pushover are not, our engineers are not used to it, and we had to make some extra effort to raise the level of knowledge before this reconstruction process. Okay, I showed this example because all in this book it was mentioned all different approaches to the reconstruction process, to the design. Also, it was proposed many solutions related to the energy efficiency, and also presented to all the structural engineers and citizens which are inside that reconstruction process, to have on the table all possible solutions and to choose one. These are presented some of typical damage of that traditional house in all historical city block. Okay, today, we can now mostly on the field, we can see reconstruction process of gable walls, chimneys, and roofs. This is the main job site today. These here are some of the solution of the wall and chimneys, and usually only made in top floors, because the people, like I said before, people don't want to move out. You can see some of the pictures from the field. They are mostly made reinforced concrete or the wooden floor to connect these walls on upper floor. And many other firms, many companies in Croatia are trying to adjust these new jobs on job sites and try to implement new techniques, especially copying from Italy, which have a large experience from this reconstruction process. In that sense, a group of 23 experts made a manual for these urgent measures, and just a few months after earthquakes, and containing several solutions for each specific problem of gable or chimney roof I mentioned before. Also, we made strong campaign of raising the level of knowledge, which was great need, and we, on faculty, we felt a great depth to that. And every 22nd of the month, we organize seminars, webinars, education, connecting practitioners, all university guests from abroad. And on 1 year of the earthquake, we made a large conference, Croatian conference on earthquake engineer, to summarize all this knowledge and try to present to all our practitioners on the field. Like my colleague Mihaela said, after every catastrophe, we have new laws, new amendment of technical code, many new things, and that's what we have to make extra effort to adapt to some procedures. And nowadays we are changing the law again, and I'm hoping that this reconstruction process will be much faster. And in all that process, we didn't need another earthquake in Petrinec. It was 6.5 with pre-shock of 5.0 magnitude. And you already saw some of general data about earthquake, but this earthquake also digital damage buildings in Zagreb, and over 5,000 buildings reported damage and requested for intervention, inspection, damage assessment. You can see affected area, it's affected several regions, a large part of Croatia, and these marks are damage assessment made again, and in 3 months we made about 50,000 inspections, damage assessments. And this assessment process after Zagreb greatly helped in the organization this large kind of catastrophe, but we didn't have time to completely use that experience and knowledge to make the system for the fight against future earthquakes. Some statistic data related to cultural heritage. You can see there, this earthquake also affected greatly on cultural heritage, on immovable cultural properties or listed cultural historical areas, houses, and immovable cultural properties, museums, facilities, libraries. You see, most of them are really seriously damaged. And you can see number of damaged building in protected historical urban zones. You have to admit there's a really large numbers. Okay, also PDNA report from Petrinec earthquake showed that the cultural heritage part is also again very great. And nowadays there are some pictures. The serious damage buildings are demolished nowadays, or a few months before. Most of activities related to the demolishing of the building, and you can see here on several slides, very sad slides, what was happened with cultural heritage building is Petrinec, in Petrinec center. And they are all recorded, and I hope they will build again better. Okay, like I said, many sacral buildings were damaged in Zagreb again. It was progressive damage. Some of the walls fell after Petrinec earthquake because they were damaged before. And also some schools recently energy efficient renewed suffered damaged. You can see here on these pictures, and there are some that is one of the issues what we have to deal with in next few steps. Okay, to conclude, we in Croatia we have many, like we said, many sins from the past, like poor databases, poor seismic risk awareness, poor preparedness, and education are not adjust to this specific problem of traditional buildings. Presently, we are dealing with some preliminary analysis, trying to spend the funds from the Solidarity Fund, still dealing with emergency measures and trying to gather all capacities we have in Croatia. Also, we're trying to raise this level of knowledge to be prepared for a long reconstruction process, what we are expecting. And in future, we are trying to implement seismic certificate and try to implement building maintenance process to improve building maintenance process, what was almost abandoned, and making some long strategy. And in these 3 points, we are hoping that we'll make some effort. I mean, nowadays we are trying to make some effort to the seismic risk awareness that people can prepare that this reconstruction process, which include building maintenance, some strategy, long strategy for all Croatia, not just Zagreb and Petrinec. Implementing a seismic certificate will last forever, and that's our goal, to make the progress in this seismic risk awareness of all people, and to make their little strategies how to reconstruct their own house, and this expand to the big strategy on the level of the state. And that's all for me. Thank you for attention. I try to be short as much as I can.
No, thank you very much, Professor Atalić. You were right in time. Thank you for sharing the data with us and providing different solutions and examples. And as you put it in your final slide, education is one of the most important ingredients. We just want to briefly also apologize to our listeners, because at few moments there were some sounds coming from your headphones, but luckily it did not affect the quality of your comprehension. It happened only once or twice. So if you heard any weird noises now, you know why it happened. As I see in the chat and in the question and answers, there are no questions at this moment. So we will proceed with our final speaker. So thank you once again, Professor Atalić.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Mr. Tomislav Petrinec, who is the main conservator for immovable cultural heritage. He is, of course, here in front of the Ministry of Culture and Media of Croatia, of Republic of Croatia. Mr. Petrinec is a graduate of the Faculty of Architecture, and he has headed the departure of conservation in Zagreb since 1997. In his professional activity to date, he has been involved in all types of work related to the protection and preservation of architectural heritage, preparation of conservation conditions, and expert opinions for intervention in protected areas, for conservation supervision of protection work on individual cultural objectives, architectural documentation of architectural and archaeological heritage, and preparation of conservation studies. He is a member of the expert commission, and I think I could carry on and on, but it's very nice that you are here, that you joined us, and when you are ready you can share your presentation and begin with your lecture. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, my greetings to everyone, and thanks the organizers for having opportunity to have a presentation in this occasion. I'll give the brief overview of the impact of the earthquakes in Zagreb and Petrinja to the cultural heritage, and the second part will be the post-earthquake response of the Conservation Service and the Ministry of Culture, and the third part will be the conservation approach to the renewal of historic core of Petrinja. Here we can see the maps of the two earthquakes that hit Croatia in 2020. The first one was 22nd March, magnitude 5.5, and the second one at the end of the year, magnitude 6.2. I would like to emphasize that the central region of Croatia that was hit by these two earthquakes belongs to the Middle European cultural and traditional circle, where the specifics of construction are common, but in the other areas of this region, there was no such earthquakes in the previous times. So this is our specific experience. Sorry. Now we can see the map. We have seen it already from Mr. Atalić, where we can see the impact of Zagreb earthquake to the city core of Zagreb, which is really large. And we have a very clear picture about the extent of damage. Now we can, I will be as short as possible because we have seen a lot of these scenes before. These are some pictures from Upper Town, from downtown, and the main effects of the earthquakes. As we have heard before, at the first sight, the damage was obvious according to the broken chimneys, gambrel walls, and decoration on the facades, but detailed examination of the houses showed that the damage is much bigger inside. The damage was the greatest to the churches, which are the special construction, of course, with the large spans, vaulted constructions, and some kind of symbol of this earthquake was the collapse of the southern tower of Zagreb Cathedral. Also, the Mirogoj Cemetery, as one of the most representative Middle European cemeteries, was heavily hit by the earthquakes. So it was pronounced among the 7 most endangered cultural sites in Europe in 2021. Here we can see the impact of the earthquake on the public buildings with all the specificities of their architecture. The museums also suffered from the earthquake, not only the buildings, but also the museum collections. So we have 15 or 33 museums that have the damages to the buildings and collections. On this slide, we can see some interiors with delicate architectural equipment and stylish elements in the public buildings of Zagreb. And now something about Petrinja earthquake. In opposite to Zagreb, this earthquake was much stronger, and it hit the city core of Petrinja, where we have not only damaged buildings, but we have partial loss of the original structure of the buildings. The damage of the earthquake was widely spread to the whole county and also affected to the all neighboring counties, and caused the progressive damage also in Zagreb and Zagreb region. Sisak historical core had damages more like to Zagreb, but a bit stronger. we can see some buildings in the center of Sisak, like the Sisak Cathedral, where the tower cap should be removed from security reasons. We can see the damages on the old bridge, where the railing was collapsed. The music school, and example of the old building of Sisak warehouse, where the gamble walls collapsed, and the biggest problem is that these broken chimneys and gamble walls here in Sisak, as well as in Zagreb, caused the damages to the neighboring buildings. Of course, in the Sisak-Moslavina county, the biggest damages are recorded to the sacral buildings, where we have very heavy damages, and also a total collapse of the constructions, especially, for instance, bell towers, which in some examples fall into the church, and broken the vaulted constructions. We have also examples of this collapsed gamble walls and the huge cracks on the certain parts of the churches. Well, something about post-earthquake response. Immediately after the earthquakes, as in Zagreb as well as in Petrinec, the Ministry of Culture organized the teams, conservation teams, for damage assessment and continuous monitoring of the situation after subsequent earthquakes. And the teams were completed with the colleagues of civil engineers and architects with the experience on the historical buildings constructions. And there was a great help for us at the first moment to have the general observations and to bring the urgent decisions about the buildings. One of the first action was to publish the instructions for the owners and contractors, owners of the buildings and contractors, about the urgent measures they could make on the buildings without permission of conservation departments. It was important to relax people in that critical moments, and we hope it would help. It helped at the first moment. Also, the Faculty of Geodesy of University of Zagreb was carried out the 3D model of historic core of Petrinec, as well as the most important buildings in Zagreb, just to document the actual state of the buildings after the earthquake. We also immediately worked on the damage assessment. Here is the example of the assessment form, which had been established or which had been created for the Zagreb earthquake. And of course, it was in use for a damage assessment on the individually projected listed buildings in the area of Petrinec earthquake. It was very important in the first time after the earthquake to remove the unstable elements of architecture, which are in the same time the elements of identity of the architecture of the Zagreb city core. So we have here some examples of removing the domes on the edge of the houses, decorations, and so on. And it is very important to have these elements for the future restoration. Of course, the security reason was the first, the most important when we decided to remove these elements. In the matter of Petrinec, as I said before, the problem was different because the building suffered the loss of structure, the characteristic of the damaging of several houses in historic core was the collapsing of the roof construction, and it provoked heavy damages on the upper floors. So we had to bring a very heavy decision for conservators to remove the unstable parts of the house, but before we must do some protective measures for the constructions we want to preserve. So we have example of the technical solution of supporting the vaulted constructions in the ground floor and putting the protective roofs on the preserved ground floors. We also tried, as in Zagreb, to remove and to storage characteristic elements of the architectural equipment of the building. And one of the proposals was to collect the old bricks from the buildings in order to make reconstruction of the buildings when it comes better, because the model of old format of bricks could be easier to fit the dimensions of the windows and other elements of the architecture. We managed to collect not a big amount of these bricks, but we hope it will be useful for a reconstruction, of course, concerning the seismic reinforcement of the buildings. It was very important, the international support, which was offered to Croatia immediately after the earthquake. So we had the mission of the Blue Helmets from Italy. They visited Croatia and they went to the field with our conservation teams and helped to evacuate the most endangered movable heritage from the churches, and gave some instructions about future work in this concerning this. The other important thing was that the Ministry of Culture, intending to have the best approach to the renewal and to the seismic reinforcement of the most important buildings, established the International Expert and Advisory Committee for the structural renovation of built heritage in the stricken areas of the Republic of Croatia. And of course, the main issues were analyzing the character of damage, condition of the structure and materials, safety and conservation approach, and the limits of acceptable changes for the cultural property, which is always the very big problem. Maybe briefly, I would repeat, we have heard this from Mrs. Zamolo and Mr. Atalić, but just a brief overview to the main features of the built heritage in this region affected with the earthquakes. We can group the heritage buildings affected from the earthquake in maybe three general groups according to the period and according to the characteristics of the constructions. The first group are the buildings from 18th century Baroque classicism style. There we have whole churches with large spaces with vaulted naves, with so-called check caps or barrel vaults, and with a lot of decorations in stucco, drawn plastic reliefs, and of course the characteristic are wall paintings and massive roof constructions, which covers these spaces. Also, the residential houses are mostly one-story houses, also with vaulted ground floors, with the same kinds of vaulted constructions, but in some smaller scale, of course. Massive brick constructions, wooden beam floors, and massive roof constructions as well. Arched lintels, and the facades are a bit more modest than as compared to the later period of historicism. We also have a few palaces with richer decoration, larger, higher, and more diverse types of space, and usually bolder spans of the main spaces up to 10 meters. Materials of this period is almost exclusively brick, rarely stone. Timber constructions and details of stone like window frames, portals, and so on. The second period, the second group of architecture is 19th century and early 20th century, historicism and Art Nouveau. The residential and commercial buildings from this period are become higher. The number of stories increase to 2, even 4 floors. The wall thickness decreases, and also the floor construction become more fragile. Shallow walls, Prussian walls, and steel beams. We have increase in the number of chimneys because they are mostly rental house for rent. So we have more flats and consequently more chimneys. And one of the most important characteristics, as I said before, it's the richly decorated facades with applied details in terracotta or in stucco and so on. The characteristic is the mass appearance of the public buildings in that time: museums, theaters, school buildings, trust buildings, hospitals. Which characterize the large halls on the first floor, the higher heights of the spaces, halls through 2 floors, and so. Also, the engineering architecture appears in this period. We can say that materials the masonry are exclusively from brick. We have steel constructions, timber constructions, and some are first concrete elements, the details of stone or artificial stone, thin details on the facades, and so on. Also, the 20th century modernism, mostly residential, commercial, and public buildings, especially school buildings with innovative floor plans, and usually combination of brick and concrete structures. So the main topic of the committee, as I said before, we have 2 main topics we discussed until now. As Mr. Atalić said, the problem with the school buildings, how to reach the necessary level of safety, and how to ensure to keep the most important features of the architecture. Here we can see the example of First School of Economics in Zagreb, where we have a very representative central hall with painted decorations on the walls, and highly decorated and richly designed door openings, and it was a problem how to implement the anti-seismic constructions in such kind of space. The second example we have also seen before is the school Titus Brezovački Gymnasium in Zagreb, where we have a problem with the construction with a seismic reinforcement project that concerns a huge amount of concrete constructions. We have seen this better on the slide of Professor Atalić. And here is the problem, how to find some solution that would be more compatible to the historic structure of the building. The second topic was the large span domes and walls, mostly in churches and other representative buildings. And the problem is how to preserve or how to enhance the constructions that takes artistic elements of architectural style. Here we can see the Church of St. Catherine in Zagreb with very richly decorated in Baroque interior. And the second example is the Church of St. Mary Magdalene in Sela near Sisak, which was heavy hit by earthquake in Petrinec. We can see the interior before the earthquake. And we have seriously damages to the central dome of the church. And here we have also the problem of preserving decorations from on the intrados of the dome, and also the problem of reinforcement of the dome. But the project is going on, and we hope that we will find the best solution. Now about renovation of the historical urban core of Petrinec. As we have seen before, Petrinec city core is one of the most devastated places, the most devastated cities by the earthquake. The dramatic situation we can see on these two smaller pictures, where we were in Petrinec after the first earthquake day before, which was 5 magnitude, and we can see the same house the second day after the earthquake of 6.2. We believe that according to the values of the Petrinec's city core, we must preserve as much as we can of these valuable historic structures of the architecture. And in terms of that, we also made the assessment of the damages in Petrinec. And we can see that the heaviest damages in the center of Petrinec. We have 31 individually protected buildings in the city of Petrinec, and the most of them are concentrated in the very center of the city. And we have the majority of the buildings in category 4 and category 5, according to EMS. Analyzing the damages to historic building, the damages, of course, can be caused by by the individual weak points of the building, but it is usually and mainly a cumulative effect of various factors. We can say that this can be the original architectural features. Some of building are better, have a better concept for the earthquakes. Some of them have not. The quality of construction, of course, used materials, the way of connecting the walls, the floor constructions, and so on. Mortars, quality of mortars, especially. Then historical alterations to the building. We have a lot of examples where during the history we had some adaptations which can be good or can be worse for the behavior of the whole construction. Also, the previous harmful events. We know that Petrinja was exposed to the earthquake in 1999, where the buildings were damaged, maybe a bit less than in this earthquake, but we don't know how the houses were refurbished, renewed. So we may have problem with this harmful damage. Also, in the period of Homeland War from 1991 to 1995, there was artillery activities in the city, and after that, the city was some of the houses were exposed to the atmospheric influence. Also, the non-maintenance of building is one of the big problems everywhere. So we have examples where the high and massive roofs of the houses have never been renewed and controlled. So we have examples of collapsing these roof constructions and subsequent damages on the walls of the buildings. Also, in recent time, we have a lot of examples of unprofessional construction works in interior and annexes and removing the walls in the houses and so on. Before I explain a few models for the renovation, I would like of the Petrinja, I would like to explain some components of evaluation of the historical urban structure of Petrinja. As we know, Petrinja was established in a very short time at the second half of 18th century and the beginning of 19th century, and its urban plan is preserved until today. On the first picture, we can see the view of Petrinja before 1824, where all urban elements were already established. The second picture shows the cadastral map from 1860. We can see the change in the structure of urban structure because the previous narrow houses were replaced with more massive houses parallel with the streets. And this is the picture, and this is the situation we have today. The most of the buildings are preserved, and that proves this ground floor plan of the Petrinja, which is very valuable document we have today for the reconstruction. It was made at the end of 20th century. Beside the urbanistic values, we have a lot of houses, Baroque Classicism houses, with very high range of the architectural equipment. Well, here we have the vaulted structures of the ground floors I mentioned before, with the massive brick walls and huge wooden roofs, as well as the typical floor plans and rich architectural details. Well, some were the Roman bricks from the Roman Siscia in vicinity were used in the construction of some buildings. Here we have some examples of this architectural equipment, and also except the stone details, wooden doors, wrought iron shutters, we have plastered or colorful details on the facade. So all these features makes Petrinja one of the most valuable little houses in continental Croatia. Conservation starting points about the renewal of Petrinja of course, preserving the authenticity of the historic urban structure to the greatest possible extent. We are aware of the extent of the damage, but we hope that we can preserve some of these structures. Preservation and reintegration of valuable architectural elements and of the buildings into the new projects. Of course, improving the condition and standards of use of historic buildings as a part of renovation, building back better. And here is the point: we can be connected with the contemporary intentions concerning energy efficiency and, of course, earthquake reinforcement and so on. Also, we are thinking about improving the quality of life in the conservation area as a whole, and of course improving the urban environment of the historical core of Petrinja. So we rely on the major international charters and documents related to the cultural heritage protection. We have some experience in previous disasters in Croatia, and here we have the words restoration, renovation, reconstruction, recovery. So Croatian experiences are related to Vukovar, where we are aware that the character of damage of the war destruction is not the same as the earthquakes one, but the intention is to identify the values and to restore them in the level of the urban identity and urban picture. From Dubrovnik, we draw experience about anti-seismic reinforcement of houses and urban blocks and city cores. Of course, the situation is also different because here we have stone as a material, and in our region we have bricks, but the methods can be sometimes the same. One of the most important things concerning renovation is conservation, existing conservation and architectural documentation. Here we have the example of the project for restoration of the facades and buildings within the city core of Petrinja, which was performed in 2005, and the several houses, about 10 houses in the city, the most valuable houses in the center of Petrinja, were detailedly researched, and we have conservation and restoration studies for renewal of the facades. Now we shall, of course, we unfortunately we don't have facades. We shall not have them in original structure, but we hope that we can establish back the architecture of the house with seismic earthquake reinforcement, and we can reconstruct the features of the facade. Here is the example of the building from the late 18th century. We can see the details still preserved on the facade of colored details of the facade. So here we have examples of the other buildings in that project. So we, according to all these values and according to the state of the buildings and the earthquake damages, we propose several models for renovation of the houses in the city core of Petrinja. Of course, criteria, as I said, is building valorization, extent and type of damage, significance of the building in the urban landscape. and the possibility of establishing the purpose and use of the house. So the model A concerns the complete preservation of original structures, renovation of the existing buildings as a whole. It's related to the buildings that are not collapsed, that are still preserved as a whole, regardless the damages they have. The model B is the partial preservation of original structures and reconstruction with reintegration of original structures. These two models concern preservation of the structure, but the model C and C1 and D concerns the new buildings. Model C is facsimile reconstruction of the whole building. This is, of course, theoretically not a very good method, but when we have short periods between the damage and the renewal, when we have documentation about the house, we think that we have right to re-establish the values of the part of the values of the former cultural good. Model C concerns the renewal facsimile reconstruction, just part of the building. The most important parts, for instance, if the building is a very exposed historical building on the edge of the block and not listed building, then we could put back the facade and with a new structure behind. Model D, it's a new replacement, concerns the new replacement building. It concerns the buildings which have no values from conservational point of view. The recent buildings which are heavily damaged in the earthquake. Here we have some examples of the approach of the model A, example court building in Petrinec, which is heavy damaged, but the structure didn't collapse and the roof is still in very good condition thanks to the previous renovation before earthquake. So, but we had to implement measures of temporary stabilization of construction, which can be seen here on this slide. And this building is waiting for the project of the renovation. The second example is the cadastral and archive storage building in Petrinec. Here we have a bit different situation. The main building is Baroque Baroque house with the recently, in the beginning of the 20th century, added annex. And this annex is hardly damaged, so it should be removed, and it's good for us because we intend to preserve the main building, Baroque building, and there is a good opportunity to add the new, completely new contemporary structure from behind for the purposes we hope for the archive and cadastre. We hope that this building will stay in this function. Here we have the proposal for this solution. The model B that concerns reconstruction with reintegration. The most of the buildings, like the example one, the parish building in Petrinec, have the ground floor structures, which is still stable, but part of the upper level, upper floor is destabilized, so it should be removed. And here we can see the situation now. The measures, the removal had been already performed, and the temporary stabilization in the ground floor, and the construction of protective roof is going on. I think it's finished until now. And the second example of the reintegration is the other building, the historicist building with rich decorations on the facade. The facade wall is still stable, but from behind the building has huge damages. So we have the example of reintegration of the facade wall, and the behind structure will be replaced with the new one. In this slide, with this slide, I want to show the importance of these vaulted constructions. Here we have some different examples, different kinds, different positions of the vaulted constructions in the houses, mostly in the entrances of the houses. We have the walls from different periods. Most of them here presented are from the Baroque or Baroque Classicism period, but we can see in the upper two slides the realization from the late 19th and beginning of 20th century with the so-called Prussian vault on the beam, steel beam construction. And we have vaulted construction in the building with the caught iron columns. The facsimile reconstruction, we intend to implement on the buildings which have the heaviest damage, like this one, which the first one, residential building in Petrinec, which is individually listed building, and we hope that we shall manage to make the facsimile reconstruction because of its value and of its position on the central city square. Here is the other example is the model C1, probably the reconstruction of the street facades, and from the behind we can add the new contemporary structure. And finally, the model D, the new replacement building. As I said, it concerns a building with no value from conservation point of view. These are mostly the building from the second half of 20th century, which are heavy damaged in this earthquake. So these two examples have already been removed, and we hope that we shall have the quality the new architecture of high quality concerning the positions on the central positions in the city. So this brings us to the end of this presentation. Well, I would like to say just a few words about the total view of Petrinec city core. We have here the blue zone, which shows the central area of Petrinec, where we shall try to implement these models of renewal, of reconstruction. But we have also several locations. We have seen them on the Mr. Atalić presentation also, where we have a huge and massive destruction. So we need to maybe some kind of urban transformation on these areas. And also we have these yellow areas. These are the historical streets that take to the center of the Petrinec. And here is the most important to keep the model of buildings the model, the sizes harmonized with the example of historical buildings on this area. Here we can see some changes, but it depends on the specific projects. The green area is, of course, one of the most important parts of the urban landscape of Petrinja. It's the Petrinčica area, which will certainly stay as one of the most attractive natural parts of the city. There are many stakeholders in this process, and of course, we hope that all efforts that includes the restoration of the most important historic buildings, the returning of the urban picture of Petrinja, and the contemporary urban transformation in the neighboring areas of the city core, we can make Petrinja again the city pleasant for life, displayed in a beautiful natural landscape and connected with Zagreb in a half-an-hour drive on the highway, through the highway. And also for the conclusion, this is the great opportunity to learn from this earthquake experience, to preserve the heritage issues in the better way, and to improve standards for living in the historic buildings and historical urban cores of the cities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Petrinec, very much for your detailed and very informative presentation. Thank you for sharing with us all the actions that the Ministry of Culture has been doing since the earthquakes happened. And also thank you for sharing the conservation perspective on this whole issue, and with taking the time to share all the examples that you did. It was very informative, so thank you for your time. As I see in the questions and the chat, there are no comments. So unless Professor Atalić has any comments, we will officially finish with this official part of the presentation. Let me just briefly remind all of our participants who are participating in this webinar that there is a Moodle platform that you can join, and we invite you to join. You already have received your login information from Senzimir Foundation, from our partners. If by any chance you didn't register so far, please do it as soon as possible. And if you didn't receive your login information, I put in the chat the email address where you can send the request to receive your login information from Senzimir Foundation. And finally, just in the end, I want to use this opportunity to invite you to join us for our third webinar that will happen next Tuesday on the 19th of October at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, Central European time. And the reason that this webinar is happening at 3 p.m. is that we are joined with speakers from the United States. So it's going to be very interesting. The topic is a living future for our past, historical building regeneration through the Living Building Challenge. So you will be officially invited again through the Moodle platform and the emails. If you have any questions and comments, please reach us, and also use the Moodle platform to introduce yourself and to engage more with all of us. And of course, the working materials and the assignments are found in the Moodle platform. And thank you once again to all of our lecturers, again to Professor Atalić, to Mr. Petrinec, to Ms. Mihaela Zamolo, and to Ms. Iva Bošnjak. It was very informative, and thank you all once again for your attention, and see you next Tuesday.